to be interviewed today.
No problem.
And again, just to remind you, there is personal information involved with this interview with regards to sex education, sexuality, and gender identity. So if at any point you feel uncomfortable, feel free to refrain from answering.
Okay.
The first question is, how do you identify in terms of gender and sexuality?
I identify as a gay man.
Have you ever felt excluded based on your sexuality or gender, and how so?
I don't know if I've been excluded per se on my gender, but my sexuality, yes. I did have a sexual behaviors class once at the university here, and there was a chapter on homosexuality, and I asked about it, but the professor actually said that it was it was a hot button topic, and that you didn't want to cover it, and I was just like, well, that's totally unfair. That's not cool. But I can't think of any other instances in which my sexuality had been infringed upon or whatever. But in terms of being a man, not so much. No.
Have you ever felt pressured to conform to society's or families, but we'll just say society's gender expectations or stereotypes? And if so, how have you tried to conform?
Gender expectations, yes, in the sense that I'm a man, so I need to be tough, I need to be strong, and all of these types of things, right? And so, in that sense, yes, I guess I've conformed. Willingly, to a certain extent, there's been, in the back of my mind, why does this matter? Why do I have to put this front on? But then, I guess the other part would just be kind of because I want to fit in, if you will. Like, I don't want to be seen as someone who doesn't fit in or an outcast. I don't know.
There's a certain degree of assimilation.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know, as an immigrant family, that's one of the big things. Oh, stereotypes. Not so much. I mean, I don't immediately come off as a gay man, so most people will just assume that I'm straight, and so I never really had to deal with like bullying or threats and things like that. So stereotypes are, for the most part, kind of like extinguished. I've never had to really battle with those. But yeah.
When did you first learn about sex?
It was probably in like 4th or 5th grade. I had got a little sticker that directed me to a website. It was called Bonus, but I had typed in the word bonus wrong, and it had auto-corrected it to buns.com, so needless to say, it was not the appropriate website, and so I was like 4th or 5th grade, and I was just like, whoa, what is this, But I had an idea of it, like my older brother, who was in a grade older, and so he had already taken sex ed, and him and his friends were like making fun of it, and they were kind of, telling me about it.
Did your parent or parents teach you anything specifically about sex? And if so, what did he, she, Z, or they teach you?
My parents taught me little to nothing about sex. Not even much about pregnancy or protecting myself. They let it entirely, it was all up to the school. Like sex, you would get educated in that, in school, and so whatever, that was something that they didn't feel like they had to worry too much about. I guess whenever I had questions about it, I would direct it to them, and they would be like, oh, well, they would get away with saying as little, much as possible, I think.
And what role would you say did the schools that you have attended, elementary, middle school, high school, college, what roles did they play in educating you about sex?
If I would have to break it down, they would probably have taught me 60 to 70% of the bulk of what I know, and the rest just came from peers, friends, and stuff like that. But it was all the standard, here's how, babies happen, this is where babies come from, this is how the male genitalia works, this is how the female genitalia works, and then here's conception, and that was it. There was no information on homosexual, sexual relationships, men and men, or women and women, or anything like that, so that was completely something I had to learn years later.
What is your opinion about what is currently being taught at schools?
The whole spectrum, or the whole thing, they're only teaching the students these days a very small amount, and it's also very controlled. They're not being open about everything out here, and let's educate everyone on everything. They're wanting to keep it very controlled, and let's educate on what we want to be seen as normal.
What do you feel is missing, or do you feel that anything is missing from sex education?
I think they should definitely diversify it, incorporate all their sexualities and not just one, because there is not just one sexuality. Other than that, I think in the earlier sex education that I had, I think it was in elementary school, it was more so on the parts and how everything works, but then the latter ones I think I had in high school was more so on diseases and safety and protection. So I think all of that is important and it's good, and that's fine the way it is, but I think diversifying it, incorporating everything else under the rainbow.
Yeah, because the way that it's set up now, it seems from what you've said that there's anatomy and then it's just the consequences. There's no real coverage of the middle ground.
Yeah, they tend to portray kind of a negative light to a certain extent.
How would you feel if gender identities and sexualities were addressed in a sex education class?
I would probably be excited, like if the younger me in elementary school would be like, whoa, this is something that is totally new and interesting, and it would apply to me in the sense that, from an early age I kind of knew that I was different in the sense that I had this attraction for men that would later evolve into a sexual attraction. But anyway, yeah, I think it would make me happy to know that, they're making strides in that, because I obviously did feel that I was different, like the lack of that made me feel different, made me feel like I was not like everyone else kind of thing, so it was kind of exclusive. But yeah.
And lastly, what would you like to see schools incorporate into sex education?
I guess like I said before, to include all sexualities on the spectrum and all genders as well on the spectrum. I guess gender identity too, to take it even a step further, because it breaks down into those three, I think that's definitely what needs to happen, and that's what I'd like to see, in terms of future sex education for the future.
Thank you for your time.
No problem.